Taoist masters believed that real power doesn't come from the outside. It's born by turning your light inward. The secret of the golden flower reveals a technique so precise. It teaches you how to spin your life force, your chi, back into the center of your being, triggering a quiet explosion of energy from within. This isn't theory. It's a method for circulating energy up the spine, down the front channel, and unlocking the true power hidden in your lower dantian. You're about to learn exactly how they did it. Ever felt like something is missing? Something just out of reach? A subtle but persistent feeling, like there's a door inside you that's always been closed. And no matter how many books you read, people you meet, or places you go, you still can't quite find the key. That feeling isn't your imagination. It's not just melancholy or burnout. It may be your spirit calling you back to something ancient, something forgotten. Long before modern psychology, long before wellness became a trend, a group of Taoist sages wrote down a method so profound, so quietly revolutionary, it had to be hidden, not out of fear, but out of reverence, because they knew the world wasn't ready. This isn't visualization. It isn't affirmation. It isn't some quick fix spiritual hack. It is a method of returning your awareness to the place it was never supposed to leave. They called it turning the light around. It sounds poetic, doesn't it? But it's more than poetry. It's a spiritual technology buried for centuries inside a Taoist text known as The Secret of the Golden Flower. This book, attributed in part to Lü Dongbin, a legendary figure in Taoist lore, isn't a myth or a parable. It's a guide, a manual for transforming scattered awareness into still presence, for awakening the energy you've always had but never known how to use. And the reason you've never heard of it until now isn't coincidence. For most of its existence, the secret of the golden flower was passed down in whispers, not printed, not preached, because misuse of the technique could do more harm than good, because its power wasn't meant to impress others, but to dissolve the illusion of the other entirely. This wasn't a teaching meant for mass consumption. It was meant for the quiet ones, the ones who felt there had to be more, the seekers, the sensitives, the ones like you. And you might be wondering, why hide something that could help so many? Because some truths don't grow in the daylight. They grow in the quiet, in the cracks between what the world calls real. This was not a doctrine, it was a seed, one that needed silence to bloom. And for those who found it, it didn't just change their thoughts, it changed their entire energy. Let's be clear, this isn't some vague idea. The practice of turning the light around is literal. It refers to redirecting your attention, your inner light, away from the distractions of the world and back toward its source. You've probably noticed your awareness is constantly being pulled outward through your senses, into your phone, into the news, into other people's opinions, into memories you can't forget, or futures you can't stop trying to control. That's not your fault. That's how modern life trains us to live, scattered, distracted, and disconnected. But turning the light around offers another way, a reversal. Instead of pushing your awareness out, it gently draws it in, not to retreat, but to return. Because the more you pour your energy outward, the less of it remains for you. Your spirit becomes diluted. Your essence forgets its own name. But when you turn that light inward, everything changes. Inside every one of us is a light, not symbolic, but energetic. It's what the Taoists called Shen, spirit, consciousness, the spark of awareness that animates your being. In most people, that light leaks out through worry, through stimulation, through emotional overexposure, through attention scattered like sand in the wind. And over time, we forget. We forget what it feels like to be whole, to feel centered, to feel present in our own bodies. But when we turn that light around, when we allow our awareness to sink inward, not as a withdrawal but as a reorientation, we begin to feel it again. Stillness, presence, home. This isn't about escaping life. It's about entering it fully, without distraction. It's about seeing clearly, not the world outside you, but the one within. You may not have had words for it before, that quiet ache, that gentle yearning, that sense that life must be more than what you're being shown. And yet, somewhere deep inside, you've always known the answers don't live out there. They live here, in the silence, in the stillness, in the space between your thoughts. Turning the light around is the moment you choose to come home to yourself, not once, but over and over again. Every time you get lost in thought, in worry, in stories that don't serve you, you gently turn the light back inward. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, but it's powerful. Because in that tiny act of remembrance, you begin to reclaim your spirit. You begin to gather the scattered pieces of your soul. And the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. This path doesn't promise you answers. It offers something better, direct experience. It teaches you how to sit in your own presence without fear, to observe without grasping, to feel without drowning. And maybe most of all, to remember that you are not broken, you are not lost. You've simply been facing the wrong direction. So now, just for a moment, close your eyes, feel the breath in your chest, the beat of your heart. Notice how everything outside you begins to fade, and what remains is you, quiet, alive, aware. That's the light, that's the presence, that's the forgotten treasure the sages protected for centuries. And it's been here all along. The secret of the golden flower was never just a book, it was a mirror. Not to show you who you've been, but to reflect who you've always been beneath it all. A witness, a light, a presence that needs no validation to exist. You may not always remember, but you can return. You can turn the light around, and in that turning, you just might find you were never as far away as you feared. But once you've turned the light around, once you've had even a glimpse of that stillness, you'll likely notice something else. The moment you step back into the world, that clarity begins to fade. Your attention drifts, the noise creeps back in, and before you know it, you're caught again in the swirl of thoughts, obligations, sensations. It's almost as if your awareness has a leak, like your energy slips out through invisible cracks in the fabric of your everyday life. If you've ever felt inexplicably tired after a conversation, restless in silence, or like you're living in your head but not in your body, this is why. We live in a world that pulls at our senses from the moment we wake up. The brightness of screens, the constant flow of notifications, the endless need to respond, react, remember, plan. Our culture has mastered the art of keeping you outward facing, because the moment you look inward, the spell breaks. You begin to see that not all of this stimulation is necessary. Not all of it is yours, and much of it is quietly draining you of your presence, your power, your peace. Ancient Taoists understood this better than we do now. They didn't have social media or 24-hour news cycles, but they saw the same dynamic playing out in the human spirit. They observed that the more your awareness is scattered across the outer world, the weaker your inner essence becomes. They believed that when your spirit gets too caught in the senses, too enamored by sight, sound, emotion, or craving, you begin to lose your center. You become like a flame flickering in the wind, technically alive, but fragile, unrooted, easily put out. And maybe that explains why so many people today feel like they're barely holding it together. Why simple decisions feel heavy. Why silence feels loud. Why peace feels so far away. It's not because you're lazy, broken, or incapable. It's because your energy, your actual life force, is fragmented, pulled in too many directions, scattered across too many surfaces, and no one ever taught you how to pull it back. But what if your exhaustion wasn't a sign of failure, but a message from your spirit? What if your scattered attention is really just sacred energy being siphoned away? What if your restlessness isn't a flaw, but a signal, a call to return? You may not have had the language for it before, but maybe you've felt it, that strange hollowness after a long day of doing everything right, that mental buzz that won't turn off even when you're lying in bed, that ache, not in your bones, but somewhere deeper, like your soul forgot something important. According to the secret of the golden flower, scattered consciousness is more than just a mental state. It is spiritual death. Not in the dramatic sense, but in the quiet way a candle burns out when no one is watching. The text doesn't say this to frighten you. It says it to wake you, because the good news is this: what was scattered can be gathered. What was lost can be remembered. Your attention is energy, and energy, once reclaimed, can begin to transform everything. So, how do you reclaim it? You start by noticing where your awareness goes when you're not directing it. You may find that it rushes toward your phone, toward old memories, toward future worries, toward noise that doesn't feed you. And the moment you notice that, you gently return. That is the reversal. That is the turning. You don't fight the distraction. You outgrow it. You become more interested in the quiet center than in the spinning edge. Imagine your consciousness as a circle. The further out from the center you go, the more chaotic everything becomes. But when you begin to draw your awareness inward, closer to the core, something happens. Your mind slows, your breath deepens, your body softens. You begin to gather yourself, and not in some metaphorical way, but in a real, visceral way. The pieces of your attention begin to come home, and you can feel it. You're no longer thinly stretched across space and time. You're here, you're whole. This is what the Taoists meant when they said the spirit must be guarded, not in fear, but in reverence, because it is through attention that energy moves. And when your attention is diffused, so is your power. But when your attention is anchored, your energy condenses. It returns to the dantian, the energy center below the navel, the furnace where inner alchemy begins. The Taoists knew that true transformation doesn't come from chasing new ideas or external solutions. It begins the moment you stop chasing altogether, when your awareness returns home, down into the body, into the breath, into that deep, quiet place behind your eyes. Then, and only then, can your spirit begin to consolidate. That is when energy gathers, not from effort, but from return. Most people never experience this because they've been conditioned to equate movement with progress, noise with meaning, stimulation with life. But the golden flower points us in the opposite direction. It shows us that clarity doesn't come from adding more, but from subtracting. That wholeness isn't found in becoming someone new, but in reclaiming who you already are underneath the static. That the way forward, paradoxically, begins by going back inward, back downward, back into silence. You may have felt this intuitively, that silence isn't emptiness, but fullness. That when the world stops pulling at you for a moment, you remember something ancient, that the deepest parts of you don't scream, they whisper, and they've been whispering for a long time, waiting for your return. Turning the light around isn't a one-time fix. It is a practice, a relationship, a remembering. And every time you notice your attention has wandered and you gently bring it home, you're weaving the pieces of your soul back together. You're cultivating a kind of presence that doesn't just feel good. It nourishes, it sustains, it protects. You don't have to abandon your life to live this way. You don't have to move to the mountains or give up your phone or renounce the world. The golden flower was never about escape. It was about mastery, inner mastery, a way to be fully in the world without being consumed by it, a way to live among the noise without becoming it, a way to let your spirit shine without burning out. So if you've been feeling scattered, there's nothing wrong with you. If you've been feeling restless, fragmented, emotionally thin, there's nothing wrong with you. What you're feeling is the truth. The modern world pulls too hard on the spirit, and no one taught us how to pull it back. But you're learning now, and with each breath, with each return to stillness, you reclaim a little more energy, a little more presence, a little more of the you that was never broken, only distracted. And that is where the real journey begins. You've felt it already, that sense of return, the quiet gathering of your scattered energy, the recognition that stillness isn't emptiness, but presence, and that presence isn't passive, but powerful. You've touched the edge of something real, something ancient, and now the question arises, how do you go deeper? This is where we turn to the heart of the practice. The Taoists didn't just speak in metaphors. Beneath the poetic language and mysterious symbols lies a precise inner method, a technique not based on blind belief or spiritual idealism, but on something radically accessible: your awareness, your attention, the very same inner light you use to navigate every waking moment of your life. They called it turning the light around. At first it sounds poetic or symbolic, something abstract to be admired rather than applied. But this phrase is not a metaphor. It is an instruction. It is the literal act of reclaiming your awareness from the external world and drawing it back inward toward its source, not by force, not by suppression, but by quiet reversal. Turning the light around means that instead of letting your mind chase outward toward people and places, toward memory or anxiety, you shift the gaze of your awareness back inside. Imagine your attention as a stream of light constantly flowing outward. This practice is about gently reversing that stream, turning it around to shine within. Lü Dongbin, one of the central figures behind The Secret of the Golden Flower, taught this with remarkable clarity. He said the spirit's light is normally scattered, pouring outward through the senses. We see, we hear, we feel, we react. Every sense pulls the spirit away from center, and that's the default setting for most people's lives, caught up in the movement of the world. But when you reverse the flow, when you bring your awareness back inward, you begin to recover something most of us have forgotten even exists. What you begin to find is a still and spacious awareness, an observer, a center. The Taoists called it the original spirit. The Buddhists referred to it as the clear light mind. In more modern terms, you might simply call it presence or being. But what matters isn't the label, it's the experience. The direct experience of noticing awareness itself without any object, thought, or feeling needing to take center stage. It begins simply. You sit, you breathe. You don't try to create silence, but you stop running from noise. You become aware of your awareness, the same way you might become aware of the space in a room rather than the furniture in it. You feel yourself behind your thoughts, not lost inside them. You observe without analyzing. You soften into stillness rather than trying to force it. And in that space, something remarkable begins to happen. The longer you rest your awareness inwardly, the more you feel it gathering, as if the scattered pieces of yourself, your energy, your thoughts, your attention are coming home, not to your mind, but to your center, to the place beneath the surface where your spirit actually lives. This reversal is the foundation of Taoist inner alchemy. It is the first and most essential movement upon which everything else depends. Without it, no deeper transformation is possible. With it, even the most ordinary life can become radiant with meaning, because this turning changes the way you relate to experience. You are no longer a leaf in the wind. You are the tree, rooted, aware, alive. It is not a trance. It's not about escaping reality. In fact, quite the opposite. When you turn the light around, you are not running from the world. You are remembering that you are never meant to live only in reaction to it. You stop being pulled outward by every trigger and instead begin to live from the inside out. In this state, your senses still function. Your thoughts still arise. Emotions still move through you, but you are not inside them. You are behind them, watching, holding, stable. From this place, even the busiest outer life can become spacious. Even a crowded mind can quiet. Not because everything becomes perfect, but because you are no longer swept away by every ripple on the surface. And this is where the Taoists were so far ahead of their time. Thousands of years ago, they understood that consciousness is not just something that happens to you, it is something you can direct. They taught that attention is energy, and where your attention goes, your life force follows. Scatter your attention and your energy thins out. Reclaim your attention and your energy becomes potent again. This is not just mystical theory. You have likely experienced it yourself. Have you ever sat in silence, feeling completely present, and noticed how alive your body felt? How calm your mind became without effort? How simply being there, breathing, felt like enough? That is not a coincidence. That is the beginning of inner power returning to its source. And this source, the Taoists said, is located in the Dantian, the lower energy center just below the navel. When the light is turned inward and the mind settles, the spirit naturally descends into this center. This is not a metaphorical descent, but a felt one, a downward settling, like sand falling through water. Your awareness, usually buzzing in the head, slowly melts down into the body, into the breath, into the now. When this happens, something subtle but profound takes place. The mind becomes still but not dull. The body becomes soft but not weak. The heart becomes open but not exposed. You are no longer fragmented across thoughts and timelines. You are whole. And that wholeness begins to generate a kind of presence that needs no validation, no performance, no achievement. It simply is, and it feels like peace. Most people have never been taught this. We're taught how to plan, how to strive, how to solve, but not how to return, not how to notice awareness itself, not how to simply be. So when we feel anxious or lost or disconnected, we assume something is wrong with us. But often, the only thing wrong is that we've been outward too long. Our light has been chasing shadows. Turning it inward is not a rejection of the world. It is a restoration of balance. A remembering that before the world began pulling at you, you were already whole, already enough, already present. And this presence is not something fragile to be protected. It is something powerful to be cultivated. The Taoists believed that with enough practice, this returning awareness begins to transform the very substance of the spirit. They called it refining the spirit and consolidating the energy. What they meant was that when you stop scattering yourself across space and time, your being condenses into something more stable, more radiant, more alive. But it begins with the simplest of shifts, a noticing, a breath, a choice not to follow the next thought, not to check the next thing, not to run from the silence, but to rest, to soften, to allow the current of your awareness to slowly turn like a river bending back toward its source. At first, it may feel subtle, even boring. The mind may protest, the body may fidget, but with time, it deepens. Like eyes adjusting to darkness, your perception begins to open. You start to sense the finer textures of consciousness, the warmth in your belly, the gentle pulse beneath your ribs, the still light behind your eyes. And in those quiet places, the real work begins. This is the forgotten technique, not because it was hidden maliciously, but because our culture stopped valuing the inner world. We stopped teaching the sacred skill of resting in our own presence. We mistook movement for aliveness, distraction for engagement, stimulation for experience. But all the while, this ancient practice remained quietly waiting just behind the curtain of your daily awareness. Turning the light around is not a performance. It is not something you do for others. It is not about appearing spiritual or calm or wise. It is deeply private, inward, yours. It is the sacred art of returning to yourself, not to your persona, not to your story, but to the you beneath the noise. And you don't need incense or robes or rituals to begin. You need only a willingness to look inward, a willingness to pause, to rest your attention not on what you should be doing, but on where you already are, to follow the thread of presence back to its source, to remember the light that shines not outward, but from within. That light is still here. It has always been. And the more you practice turning toward it, the brighter it becomes. The world may never stop asking for your attention, but now you know where to bring it home. And this is where the deeper work begins. Because once you've tasted that inner stillness and gathered your scattered energy back into center, you may begin to notice that something in your body still feels out of sync. It's not quite the mind this time, and it's not just emotional. It's more primal, like an ancient rhythm that has been playing out underneath your awareness for so long that you forgot it was even there. And when you finally pay attention to it, you realize that it has been leading you in the wrong direction all along. That rhythm is your breath. We're taught that breath is life, and in many ways it is. But what if your breath has been lying to you? What if the way you've been breathing your whole life is subtly draining you instead of sustaining you? What if something so automatic, so unconscious, has been keeping you in a loop of depletion without your consent? In the teachings of the secret of the golden flower, breath is not just a biological function. It is the vehicle of transformation. It is the current that carries the spirit. And if that current is flowing in the wrong direction, no amount of meditation or intention will truly stabilize your inner power. This is the hidden key, not just to quiet the mind or gather attention, but to circulate life force in a way that feeds your essence instead of leaking it out. Most people are chest breathers, shallow, fast, reactive breathing that rises high into the upper body, triggered by stress, anxiety, or habit. It keeps the nervous system alert, the energy scattered, and the mind restless. Even when you try to relax, this breath pattern keeps you on edge. It's not your fault. It's how most of us were conditioned to breathe by modern life, tight clothing, emotional trauma, and social pressure to hold ourselves in. But Taoist masters observed something different. They saw that the breath has a secret direction, and that direction is not up and out. It is in and down. This is called reverse breathing, and it changes everything. In reverse breathing, when you inhale, your lower belly pulls in gently and the pelvic floor subtly lifts. This may feel counterintuitive at first, especially if you've practiced abdominal breathing before, where the belly expands on the inhale. But in Taoist internal alchemy, the point is not to relax into breath, but to contain and circulate it. The inhale becomes a drawing in, not just of air, but of qi, your subtle life force. The exhale becomes a sinking down, a grounding of that energy into the lower dantian, the center of gravity below your navel. This is where the magic happens, because when breath moves downward on the exhale, it carries your awareness with it. Instead of rising into the head, where thoughts swirl and emotions escalate, your energy settles deep into your core. Over time, this begins to consolidate your spirit. You feel more stable, more rooted, more whole, not because you forced anything, but because your breath stopped betraying you. It's a strange feeling at first, like realizing you've been walking with a limp for years and suddenly remembering how to stand straight. Reverse breathing doesn't just oxygenate the body, it reorients the flow of your entire being. In Taoist terms, it draws the yang energy inward and downward, restoring balance between heaven and earth within your own system. And this is where real power begins to emerge. You may have noticed that when you're emotionally overwhelmed, your breath becomes erratic. When you're afraid, it gets stuck. When you're distracted, it gets shallow. And when you're trying to perform or impress, you often stop breathing altogether. These are not just habits, they are signals. Your breath is trying to tell you something. It's showing you where your energy is going, where your spirit is leaking, where your internal alignment has been lost. But now, with reverse breathing, you begin to reclaim that power. Each inhale becomes a conscious retrieval of your scattered self. Each exhale, a sinking into your truth. You no longer breathe to survive. You breathe to return, to remember, to reawaken. And this isn't just philosophy. The physiological effects are profound. Reverse breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, calming the mind and reducing inflammation. It stabilizes the diaphragm and strengthens the pelvic floor, creating a container for qi. It draws the breath away from the chest and shoulders, reducing tension and unlocking deeper stores of energy. And most importantly, it changes your relationship to your body. You begin to live from the center, not the surface. This is what the Taoist texts meant when they spoke of gathering the spirit through the breath. It wasn't metaphorical. They were describing an energetic reality that modern science is only beginning to understand. Your breath doesn't just carry oxygen, it carries consciousness. And when you direct that consciousness inward and downward, you begin to transform. At first, you may only feel subtle shifts, a little more presence in your abdomen, a softening of tension in your chest, a slight pause between inhale and exhale that feels like standing on the threshold of something vast. But over time, something deeper begins to emerge. You may feel heat in the lower belly, a gentle pulse, a sense of quiet intensity, like a furnace beginning to glow. This is the beginning of inner alchemy. In the West, we've been taught to fix things from the outside. We try to manage our stress, optimize our schedules, balance our hormones, and chase new techniques. But Taoist practice turns everything inward. It says, stop chasing, sit, breathe, reverse, let the current come home. And in that stillness, something ancient stirs. The secret of the golden flower describes this process as the turning of the breath light. Breath is the vehicle, light is the spirit. When they begin to move together, inward and downward, something miraculous happens. You stop living on the surface of your life. You begin to descend into its depth. You feel more alive, not because more is happening, but because you are fully present to what already is. This is the true meaning of reclaiming your energy. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about correcting the direction of what's already flowing through you. Your breath has always been there, moment by moment, but it has not always been your ally. Not because it is wrong, but because it was never trained. And now you are beginning to train it, to use it, to trust it again. There's a moment in practice when you realize that reverse breathing isn't just a technique, it's a language, a conversation between your body and your spirit, a way of remembering who you are, not through thoughts or beliefs, but through sensation and rhythm. The inhale becomes a question, the exhale becomes an answer. And in that exchange, you begin to feel whole again. You don't have to be perfect at it. You don't have to master it overnight. The breath is patient. It meets you where you are. Every conscious reversal is a step closer to home. Even if you forget and return to old patterns, the very act of noticing is part of the path. You're not failing, you're remembering. And this remembrance is what builds inner strength. Not the kind of strength that resists, but the kind that contains. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that radiates. A quiet, anchored presence that can walk into the chaos of the world without being pulled apart by it. Because now, your breath is no longer scattering your spirit, it is gathering it. If you've ever felt like you were missing something essential, if you've ever felt disconnected from your own body, if you've ever wondered why peace always seems just out of reach, look to your breath. Not to analyze it, but to reclaim it, to turn its flow inward, to allow it to carry you back to center. You don't have to understand all the mechanisms. You only need to feel the shift, from up to down, from out to in, from fragmented to whole. And as you breathe this way again and again, the transformation begins to deepen. Not all at once, but layer by layer, breath by breath, return by return, until one day, without trying, you notice that your baseline has changed. You are calmer, clearer, more rooted. You move through life with more ease, more clarity, more quiet confidence, because your breath is no longer lying to you. It is guiding you, and that changes everything. And so you begin to breathe differently, not as a habit, but as a conscious act. You notice how your inhale draws energy in and how your exhale grounds it. With reverse breathing, the old unconscious pattern is undone. The breath becomes circular. The inner furnace, the dantian, begins to warm. It is subtle but unmistakable. And as that inner fire stirs, something ancient awakens, not in the mind, in the silence beneath the mind. This silence is not the absence of sound. It is not the silence of a quiet room or a pause in conversation. It is a different kind of silence. It is the silence that has been here long before your thoughts began. A stillness that does not need to be created because it is already present. It only needs to be remembered. And it is in this remembering that the golden flower begins to bloom. The Taoists use the image of a flower not for decoration, but for precision. A flower unfolds gradually. It does not force itself open. It turns to the light, but grows from the dark. And just like that, your spirit begins to open, slowly, silently, from the inside out. As the breath deepens and your awareness gathers inward, the petals of your inner being begin to unfurl. You may not notice it at first. The world around you still rushes. Thoughts still arrive. Life continues to demand your attention, but something within you has shifted. The noise no longer penetrates in the same way. You are no longer tethered to the outer world by default. You have a choice now, and that choice is where the power lives. Because silence is not passive. It is potent. It is the womb of all transformation. When you enter this silence consciously, when you sit in it, not to escape, but to listen, you begin to hear something you've missed for most of your life. You begin to hear the language of energy, the currents of your own being, the quiet rhythm of your soul, remembering itself. The golden flower is a metaphor, but it is also more than that. It is a description of a state of consciousness that blooms when the spirit is no longer scattered, when the breath is no longer wasted, when the awareness no longer leaks outward. It is the point at which your essence begins to gather itself with such focus and gentleness that it transforms, it condenses, it refines, and from that refinement, something luminous emerges. But the blooming does not come from effort. That is the paradox. You cannot chase it. You cannot force it. You can only create the conditions in which it naturally arises. Just as no flower can be opened by pulling its petals apart, your spirit cannot awaken by force. It awakens by presence, by stillness, by the kind of attention that is soft enough to receive, but strong enough to stay. Many people seek awakening through intensity. They chase peak experiences. They look for ecstasy, for transcendence, for fireworks. But the golden flower blooms in the quiet, in the in-between. It blooms when you have gathered your energy, refined your breath, and turned your light inward long enough for something deeper to take root. It does not arrive with drama. It arrives with peace. And the peace it brings is not ordinary. It is not relaxation. It is not even calm. It is a kind of radiant stillness, a clarity that does not need explanation, a knowing that has nothing to prove. It is the peace of being exactly where you are, with nothing missing, nothing to chase, nothing to fix. It is the return to your original nature. The Taoists call this process inner alchemy, because what changes is not just your thoughts or your emotions. What changes is the very quality of your energy. It becomes finer, brighter, more coherent. And as this happens, something beautiful begins to unfold. You become aware of the golden flower, not as an object, but as a presence, a field, a subtle luminosity at the center of your being. You might feel it as a warmth behind your navel, or as a gentle pulse between your eyes, or simply as a quiet joy that arises for no reason at all. These are signs, not goals, indications that your energy is becoming whole again, that your spirit is beginning to harmonize with itself, that your breath, your awareness, and your essence are now moving in unison. This is the flowering of the inner life. And once it begins, it doesn't need constant tending. It feeds itself like a fire that has caught It grows by its own nature. But it does ask one thing of you: presence. Not perfection, not control, just presence. The willingness to keep returning, to keep listening, to keep choosing the quiet center over the noisy edge. And in this presence, something else begins to happen. You start to see the world differently, not as something to react to, but as something to witness. The outer world still moves, but you are no longer caught in its turbulence. You become like the eye of a storm, still while everything else spins. And from this stillness, a new kind of compassion emerges, because when you are no longer leaking energy into judgment or comparison or fear, you have more space to love, more space to see with others without losing yourself. The golden flower is not just for you. It is the rebirth of your capacity to live with an open heart, to meet life not from depletion, but from fullness. And that fullness is what changes everything. You start to make different choices, not because you should, but because they feel more aligned. You are no longer pulled by every passing impulse. You are guided by something deeper, and that guidance feels unmistakable. It feels like truth, not an idea of truth, but a living truth, the kind that moves through your body before it reaches your mind. You trust more, not because everything is certain, but because you are more centered. The fear that used to control you begins to soften. The doubt that used to paralyze you begins to dissolve. You begin to realize that clarity is not the absence of uncertainty, but the ability to stay present in its midst. This is what it means to bloom from within. The breath becomes your anchor. The silence becomes your teacher. The golden flower is no longer a symbol. It is your experience. It is the living core of your being, and it keeps blooming. But what happens next when the flower has bloomed in silence? Where does all this inner light go? The Taoists believed this was the moment your true transformation begins. If you've ever wondered if it's possible to be reborn without dying, to start again without losing everything, this is the stage you've been searching for. The ancient texts call it building the spiritual embryo. It sounds mysterious, even impossible, but if you listen to the silent places inside yourself, you might realize you've always longed for this kind of second birth. Have you ever felt your life was scattered, as if your energy was leaking out through every regret, every worry, every hope for the future? Maybe you've noticed how easy it is for your attention to be pulled in 100 directions, leaving you feeling thin, tired, and disconnected from yourself. The Taoists saw this as the natural state of the untrained mind. They called it scattered consciousness. To them, it was a kind of spiritual death, a life lived on the surface, never rooted, never whole. But the golden flower teaches that this is not the end of the story. Just as a seed gathers all its energy into a single point before it sprouts, you too can draw your scattered self back to the center. This is the beginning of the spiritual embryo. It is not dramatic, it is subtle, almost invisible, but it is the heart of Taoist inner alchemy. Imagine what it feels like to come home after a long journey. The world outside is still noisy, still uncertain, but inside something is gathering. There's a warmth in your belly, a light behind your eyes. Maybe you felt this in rare moments, after meditation, in the quiet, after a storm of emotion, in the stillness that follows heartbreak. That sense of quiet gathering is the first sign of the spiritual embryo forming. The Taoists described it like this: when the light of your awareness, which usually flows outward through your senses, is turned back and gathered at the center, specifically in the lower dantian, just below your navel, something miraculous begins to happen. The scattered parts of your being start to fuse. The many voices in your head begin to harmonize. The pain, the longing, the confusion, they don't vanish, but they are no longer in charge. How does this actually feel? Sometimes it's a gentle pressure in the belly, a subtle warmth, or a sense of inner fullness. Other times, it's just a quiet confidence, a knowing that you are, for once, whole. It's as if your soul, long exiled, is finally returning home. This is what the Taoists called rebirth without dying. It's not about escaping your life or denying your wounds. It's about allowing all the parts of you, especially the broken ones, to be gathered, held, and transformed. The spiritual embryo is not a fantasy. It is the living core of your being, condensed and nurtured through attention, breath, and inner stillness. Remember those times when you felt like you were falling apart, the moments when grief or loss or sheer exhaustion left you feeling hollow. The Taoists would say those are the moments when the old self is dissolving, making space for something new. The pain is not a punishment. It's the soil in which the spiritual embryo can take root. But here's the part most people miss. The embryo cannot be forced. You can't will it into existence through effort or ambition. You can only create the conditions for it to grow by gathering your light, by quieting the mind, by breathing into the center of your being. The rest happens on its own, like a seed sprouting in the dark. If you've ever felt your life was meant to be more than just survival, if you've sensed that beneath the surface of your daily struggles, there is a deeper current pulling you toward wholeness. This is the stage where that intuition becomes real. The spiritual embryo is not a metaphor. It is the living, breathing possibility of becoming new without having to lose your body, your mind, or your history. As you practice turning the light around, old patterns begin to loosen. The stories you told yourself about who you are, too broken, too late, too much, begin to dissolve. In their place, a new story begins to write itself, not with words, but with presence. You are no longer just the sum of your wounds. You are the one who is gathering the pieces, weaving them into something whole. The Taoists were clear. This is not a one-time event. The spiritual embryo is built slowly, through daily practice, through patience, through the willingness to sit with discomfort and not run away. It is born in silence, fed by breath, and protected by your own gentle attention. Each time you gather your scattered thoughts, each time you return to the center, you are feeding the embryo. Each time you choose presence over distraction, you are nurturing your own rebirth. And yet, the process is not always easy. There will be days when you feel nothing is happening, days when the old pain resurfaces, when doubt creeps in, when you wonder if any of this is real. The Taoists understood this too. They wrote that the embryo grows in darkness, unseen, often doubted even by those who nurture it. But if you persist, if you keep gathering your light, one day you will feel it. A quiet solidity, a center that cannot be shaken. It is in this stage that the meaning of your pain begins to change. What once felt like senseless suffering now reveals itself as the raw material for transformation. The losses, the heartbreaks, the disappointments, they become the compost that feeds your new life. You begin to see that nothing was wasted. Every moment of loneliness, every tear, every regret, they were all part of the alchemy. You may have heard the phrase born again. In the West, it often refers to a dramatic conversion, a sudden change. But the Taoist rebirth is quieter, deeper. It is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming who you truly are, beneath the noise and the fear. The spiritual embryo is your original self, waiting to be born, not after death, but now, in this very life. Have you ever wondered why, after all the searching, all the striving, you still feel a longing for something more? The Taoists would say it is because the embryo has not yet been fully formed. The longing is the call to gather yourself, to return to the center, to nurture the possibility of a second life, one that is not defined by the past, but by the quiet power blooming at your core. And so, if you find yourself here, listening, reflecting, hoping for a new beginning, know that you are not alone. The path of the spiritual embryo is ancient, but it is also yours. Each breath, each moment of stillness, each act of gentle attention is a step toward your own rebirth, not in some distant future, but here, now, in the quiet blooming of your innermost being. You are not just surviving, you are gathering, you are becoming whole. The spiritual embryo is already forming quietly in the dark. All you have to do is keep turning your light around, keep gathering your breath, and trust that the new life you long for is already growing inside you. You may have noticed, as the spiritual embryo quietly forms within you, that the urge to do more, to fix, to force, begins to lose its grip. There is a subtle shift, almost imperceptible at first, where the frantic need to control your journey gives way to something softer. The Taoists called this next stage the cultivation of a mirror mind. It is the art of stillness, the secret of becoming powerful by letting go. Have you ever watched a pond after the wind has died down? The surface, once rippled and restless, becomes perfectly smooth. Suddenly, it reflects the sky, the trees, the world around it, with a clarity that was impossible before. The Taoists saw the mind in the same way. When the heart is agitated, when thoughts chase each other in endless circles, nothing can be seen clearly. But when the heart is quiet, when the mind becomes still, it turns into a mirror. It reflects everything, grasps nothing, and in that reflection, a different kind of power is born. You may have felt this in your own life, though perhaps you did not have words for it. Remember a moment when you stopped struggling, when you simply let yourself be, and suddenly the answer you were seeking appeared on its own. Maybe it was in the hush after heartbreak, or the quiet after a long day's exhaustion, or in the gentle peace that sometimes follows tears. The Taoists would say, in those moments, your mind had become a mirror. You were not trying to force clarity. You were simply allowing it to arise. This is the paradox at the heart of Taoist alchemy. The more you try to grasp at power, the more it slips away. The more you strive, the more you exhaust yourself. But when you stop grasping, when you let go of effort, energy begins to gather of its own accord. The ancient masters wrote, "The heart must be quiet," not because quietness is the goal, but because only in quietness can the true work begin. Have you ever noticed how exhaustion is not just physical, but spiritual? The endless striving, the constant self-improvement, the belief that you must always be doing more. These are the habits that drain your life force. The Taoists understood this long before modern psychology. They taught that effort, when it comes to inner transformation, is like stirring muddy water. The more you stir, the cloudier it gets. But if you leave it alone, the mud settles and the water becomes clear. You may have been taught that peace is something you have to earn, that stillness is a luxury reserved for those who have finished all their tasks. But the Taoists invite you to consider the opposite. What if stillness is not the reward but the path? What if the very act of doing less, of letting go, is what unlocks the power you have been seeking all along? This is not about apathy or giving up. It is about a different kind of attention. The mirror mind is not passive. It is alive, awake, and deeply engaged. But it does not cling. It does not judge. It simply reflects what is, without distortion. In this state, the energy that was once scattered in worry and striving begins to return to you. The heart, no longer agitated, becomes a vessel for power. Have you ever sat in meditation and found your mind racing, your body restless, your thoughts refusing to settle? The natural instinct is to try harder, to force yourself into stillness. But the Taoists would smile gently and remind you, effort ruins energy work. The more you try to pin down your thoughts, the more they slip away. The more you chase after peace, the more elusive it becomes. Instead, they invite you to become like the mirror. Allow thoughts to come and go without grasping or pushing them away. Notice the sensations in your body, the rise and fall of your breath, the subtle movements of energy within. Let everything be as it is. In this space, something remarkable happens. The mind, no longer caught in struggle, begins to settle on its own. The heart grows quiet. The spiritual embryo, nurtured in stillness, begins to shine. This is the reversal that surprises most people. You have spent a lifetime believing that more effort equals more results, but here, in the secret chambers of your own being, the opposite is true. Doing less unlocks more. Letting go gives you what striving never could. The power you have been seeking is not out there, waiting to be conquered. It is inside, waiting to be revealed by your own quiet attention. You may find this deeply counterintuitive. You are not alone. Most of us have been trained to equate action with progress, to fear stillness as stagnation. But if you look back at your life, you may notice that your greatest insights, your deepest healing, your most profound moments of clarity have come not when you were pushing, but when you were allowing. Not in the noise, but in the silence. The Taoists called this Wu Wei, effortless action. It is not laziness, nor is it resignation. It is the art of aligning yourself with the natural flow of life, trusting that what is meant for you will come and what is not will pass. The mirror mind is the foundation of this art. It is the state in which you become receptive to the wisdom that is always present, just beneath the surface of your thoughts. Have you ever wondered why, after all your striving, you still feel tired, unfulfilled, as if something essential is just out of reach? The Taoists would say it is because you have been looking in the wrong direction. The answer is not in doing more, but in being more present, not in grasping, but in reflecting. The mirror mind does not chase after power. It reveals the power that is already there. As you sit with this, you may notice a subtle peace beginning to settle in your chest. The exhaustion that once felt like a burden now feels like an invitation to rest. The longing for answers becomes a gentle curiosity, a willingness to see what arises when you stop trying to control the outcome. In this space, energy returns, clarity dawns. The heart, once restless, becomes a sanctuary. You are not broken for needing rest. You are not lazy for wanting peace. You are simply remembering what the Taoists knew, that real transformation begins when the heart is quiet, when the mind is still, when you become the mirror that reflects the world without clinging to it. So if you find yourself weary, if you are tired of striving, if you long for a different way, know that you are exactly where you need to be. The mirror mind is not a distant ideal. It is your natural state, waiting to be uncovered beneath the noise of daily life. Each moment of stillness, each breath of quiet is a return to your own true power. Let the mind be the mirror. Let the heart be quiet. In doing less, you unlock more than you ever imagined. Stillness brings clarity. The mirror mind, once agitated by striving, now reflects the world as it truly is. But as the surface calms, you may begin to notice something unexpected. Beneath the quiet, there are shadows, old pains, restless thoughts, hidden cravings. These are the invisible wounds that have been shaping your energy all along. Have you ever wondered why, even in moments of peace, a strange heaviness lingers in your chest? Or why, when you try to rest, your mind replays the same memories, the same worries, over and over? Perhaps you have felt a sudden wave of sadness for no clear reason, or a tightness in your body that refuses to let go. The Taoists saw these not as random flaws, but as signs that your qi, your vital energy, is being blocked by wounds you cannot always see. It is a quiet truth, one that modern life rarely acknowledges. Emotional trauma, overthinking, addiction, and restlessness are not just psychological struggles. They are energetic knots, places where your life force cannot flow freely. The secret of the golden flower calls them poisonous thoughts. They are the silent bindings that keep the spirit from rising, the invisible chains that fragment your energy and leave you feeling scattered, tired, or numb. You may have noticed how a single painful memory can haunt you for years, resurfacing at the worst possible moments, or how a habit you cannot break, whether it is reaching for your phone, pouring another drink, or replaying an old argument, seems to drain your energy, leaving you hollow. The Taoists understood this deeply. They taught that every unhealed wound, every unresolved emotion becomes a blockage in the subtle channels of your body. Over time, these blockages accumulate, making it harder and harder for your qi to circulate. Have you ever felt that no matter how hard you try to meditate, to relax, to find peace, something inside keeps pulling you back into old patterns? The Taoists would say this is not a failure of willpower. It is a sign that your energy is fragmented. The mind tries to be still, but the wounds beneath the surface keep stirring the water. The heart longs for peace, but the poison of old pain keeps seeping in. This is not your fault. It is the inheritance of being human. Every heartbreak, every disappointment, every moment you were not seen or heard or loved as you needed to be leaves a mark. Over time, these invisible wounds shape the way your energy moves. Sometimes it rushes out in anger, sometimes it collapses in despair, sometimes it scatters in anxiety or addiction. You may have felt this as a sense of being trapped in your own body, unable to move forward, unable to let go. But here is the turning point. The Taoists did not see these wounds as permanent. They believed that every blockage, every knot, every poisonous thought could be transformed. The first step is awareness. Just as the mirror mind reflects what is without judgment, you are invited to look at your own pain not as an enemy to be fought, but as a message to be understood. Have you ever noticed how, when you finally allow yourself to feel an emotion fully, it begins to shift? The tightness in your chest softens, the tears come and go, and suddenly there is space where before there was only pain. The Taoists would say that in this moment, your qi is starting to move again. The blockage is loosening. The energy that was trapped in old wounds is returning to the center. You may be wondering how to begin this process. The answer is not to force healing, but to create the conditions for it. Just as you learned to let the mind become a mirror, you can learn to let your wounds be seen. When pain arises, instead of turning away, you turn toward it. You breathe into the discomfort. You notice where it lives in your body. You allow it to speak without rushing to fix or explain it away. This is not easy. It takes courage to face what you have spent a lifetime avoiding. But in this gentle attention, something remarkable happens. The energy that was bound up in pain begins to flow. The sadness, the anger, the fear, they become fuel for transformation. The poison becomes medicine. Have you ever felt a sudden wave of relief after finally admitting the truth to yourself? Or a sense of lightness after crying, after years of holding it all in? The Taoists would say that in these moments, your chi is being freed. The invisible wounds are being healed, not by force, but by the quiet power of presence. Modern life gives us endless ways to distract ourselves from pain. We scroll, we binge, we numb, but the cost is high. Every time we turn away from our wounds, we add another layer of blockage. The energy that could be used for creativity, for love, for growth, gets trapped in old patterns. You may have noticed how exhaustion sets in, how joy becomes harder to find, how the world feels duller, heavier, but it does not have to stay this way. The secret of the golden flower teaches that healing is not just possible, it is the gateway to true power. When you begin to clear the blockages, when you allow your chi to circulate freely, everything changes. The mind grows clearer, the body feels lighter, the heart opens. You begin to sense a current of energy rising from within, a quiet strength that cannot be shaken by circumstance. This is not a promise of a life without pain. The wounds of the past may never disappear completely, but they no longer define you. They no longer control the flow of your energy. Instead, they become part of your story, evidence of your resilience, your willingness to heal, your capacity for transformation. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to radiate a quiet power even when life is hard? The Taoists would say it is because they have faced their wounds. They have allowed the poison to become medicine. They have learned that healing is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of true empowerment. If you find yourself here, feeling the weight of invisible wounds, know that you are not alone. Your pain is not a weakness. It is the doorway to your strength. Each time you turn toward it, each time you allow yourself to feel, you are reclaiming your energy. You are clearing the channels for your chi to flow. You are moving from fragmentation to wholeness. The journey is not linear. There will be days when the old pain returns, when the blockages feel as strong as ever. But each time you meet yourself with compassion, each time you choose presence over avoidance, you are making progress. The invisible wounds lose their power. The energy that was trapped becomes available for life, for love, for creation. You may have spent years feeling defined by your pain, believing that healing was out of reach. But the Taoists offer a different vision. They invite you to see your wounds as invitations, your blockages as opportunities, your suffering as the raw material for alchemy. The poisonous thoughts that once bound your spirit can become the very fuel that sets you free. So if you are tired, if you are weary of carrying invisible burdens, let this be your turning point. The path of the golden flower is not about perfection. It is about transformation. It is about gathering the scattered pieces of yourself, clearing the blockages, and allowing your true power to flow. The invisible wounds are not the end of your story. They are the beginning of your healing. And as your chi begins to move again, you may discover a strength, a clarity, a peace you never thought possible. The journey continues. You may have noticed, as your energy begins to flow more freely, that something subtle shifts in your relationship to power. There is a new sense of possibility, a quiet strength awakening inside you. But with this awakening comes a deeper responsibility. The Taoist masters, especially Lü Dongbin, were clear. The path of inner alchemy is not without its shadows. The very forces that heal and empower can also harm if approached with the wrong heart. Have you ever felt a surge of energy after a breakthrough, only to find yourself tempted to use it for control, for validation, or to prove something to others? This is a crossroads every seeker faces. The desire for power is natural, but if it is not anchored in purity, it can quickly become a trap. The Taoists warned that spiritual fire, if misused, can burn just as fiercely as it heals. Lü Dongbin's teachings are filled with cautionary tales. He saw how easily the ego can hijack the process of awakening. Ambition, pride, and the hunger for recognition. These are the poisons that can turn even the most sincere practice into a source of suffering. You may have felt this yourself, the way a moment of clarity can slip into superiority, or how a taste of inner strength can inflate the sense of self. The Taoists called this the rise of the demonic light. The demonic light is not some supernatural force. It is the false awakening, the illusion that you have arrived, that you are special, that you are above others because of your spiritual insight. It is the subtle voice that whispers, "Now you have power. Use it to get what you want." But this is not true power. It is a distortion, a shadow that grows when the light is used for self-aggrandizement instead of self-realization. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to become attached to progress, to seek validation through spiritual achievement? Maybe you have felt pride in your ability to meditate, to control your breath, to generate energy. Or perhaps you have compared your journey to others, measuring your worth by how much you have awakened. The Taoists saw this as one of the greatest dangers on the path. The very practices meant to free you can become chains if they feed the ego instead of dissolving it. You may be wondering, how can something as pure as spiritual practice go astray? The answer lies in intention. When the heart is not quiet, when the mind is not clear, even the most powerful techniques can be twisted. The energy that should be used for awakening is diverted into ambition, into the endless chase for more. The Taoists taught that effort ruins energy work, not just through force, but through impure motives. Lü Dongbin warned that chasing power for its own sake is like trying to grasp fire with bare hands. It burns, it blinds, it destroys what it was meant to illuminate. You may have seen this in others: a teacher who becomes obsessed with followers, a healer who seeks fame, a seeker who loses themselves in visions and mystical experiences. The outer signs of power are there, but the inner purity is lost. This is not just a warning for others. It is an invitation to look within. Have you ever caught yourself seeking spiritual experiences for the thrill, for the escape, for the sense of being special? Have you ever felt a subtle pride in your suffering, in your ability to endure, in your knowledge of hidden truths? The Taoists would say, this is the demonic light at work. It is the shadow of the spiritual path, the illusion that power is an end in itself. For the true purpose of inner alchemy is not to become powerful, but to become pure. Power is a byproduct, not the goal. The more you chase it, the more it slips away. The more you purify your heart, the more power flows naturally, without effort, without distortion. You may have noticed that the moments of deepest peace, the times when your energy feels most alive, are also the moments when you are least concerned with power. There is no striving, no comparison, no need to prove anything. There is only presence, clarity, and the quiet joy in being. The Taoists called this the state of no rank, the place where you are neither above nor below, neither seeking nor avoiding, simply present to what is. Have you ever wondered why some people, despite years of practice, seem to become more rigid, more dogmatic, more isolated? The Taoists would say it is because they have fallen into the trap of the demonic light. They have mistaken the signposts for the destination, the power for the purity. The result is a hardening of the heart, a narrowing of the mind, a loss of the very freedom they sought. This is why Lü Dongbin emphasized humility, compassion, and self-honesty above all else. The real danger is not in the techniques themselves, but in the motives behind them. When you approach the path with a pure heart, with a willingness to see your own shadows, the energy you awaken becomes a force for healing, for connection, for awakening. When you chase power for its own sake, it becomes a source of suffering for yourself and for others. You may feel tension as you hear this. That is good. It means you are taking the path seriously. The Taoists did not sugarcoat the risks. They knew that real transformation requires vigilance, self-reflection, and a willingness to let go of the need to be special. The fire of awakening is not to be played with lightly. It demands respect, humility, and a continual return to the heart. Have you ever felt a sense of emptiness after a spiritual high, a letdown after a moment of insight? The Taoists would say this is a sign that the energy was not integrated, that the motive was not pure. The answer is not to chase another high, but to return to the basics, quiet the heart, purify the intention, let go of the need for recognition. If you find yourself tempted by the promise of power, if you feel the pull of ambition or the sting of pride, know that you are not alone. Every seeker faces these shadows. The difference is in how you respond. Do you double down, chasing ever greater experiences? Or do you pause, reflect, and ask yourself, why am I on this path? What am I really seeking? The Taoists invite you to choose purity over power, presence over performance, humility over ambition. The real gift of this practice is not what you can do, but who you become. The energy you awaken is not for control, but for awakening, for healing, for returning to your true self. So if you feel the weight of this responsibility, if you sense the tension between power and purity, trust that you are being called to a deeper level of honesty. The dangers are real, but so is the potential for transformation. The fire of awakening can burn, but it can also illuminate. The choice is yours. You may have felt the weight of choosing purity over power, presence over performance, humility over ambition. You may have sensed the tension between the fire that can burn and the fire that can illuminate. Now, as the echoes of these warnings fade, you are left with a quieter invitation, a return to something that has always lived within you, waiting for your attention. Have you ever noticed that after all the striving, all the searching for answers outside yourself, There is a moment when you simply stop, not out of defeat, but because the search itself has led you back to the beginning. The Taoists call this the return to the source. It is not a new destination, but a homecoming. You are not asked to become someone new. You are asked to remember who you have always been. Perhaps you have felt it in the hush after a storm of emotion, or in the silent space between thoughts. That subtle warmth in your chest, that gentle clarity behind your eyes. It is not the voice of a distant master, but your own inner light. The teacher you have been seeking is not somewhere far away. It is the quiet presence that has always guided you, even when you doubted it was there. All along this path, you have encountered techniques, warnings, and revelations. You have faced the shadows of ambition, the temptations of ego, the dangers of chasing power for its own sake. You have learned that the energy you awaken is not meant for control, but for healing, for awakening, for returning to your true self. Now, the final lesson is not about mastery over energy, but about surrender to the light that is already yours. Have you ever wondered why, after all the teachings, the moments that move you most are those that feel like coming home? The Taoists spoke of the true man of no rank, a person who does not seek titles, recognition, or status, but lives in quiet alignment with their own nature. This is not a state to be achieved, but a truth to be uncovered. The journey is not about rising above others, but about dissolving the need to compare at all. You may have spent years searching for a master, a guide, someone to tell you what is true, but every genuine teacher, every authentic teaching has always pointed you back to yourself. The golden flower is not a symbol of something you must become. It is the living core of your being, blooming quietly in the darkness, needing only your attention to reveal its light. Remember the times you felt misunderstood, carrying questions no one else seemed to ask, feeling the ache of loneliness or the weight of unspoken pain. The Taoists would say that was your inner teacher calling you home. Every longing for clarity, every ache for connection, every silent hope for peace was an invitation to listen more deeply to the wisdom already present within you. You may have believed that progress meant becoming someone different, shedding your old self for a new identity. But the Taoist path is circular, not linear. It is not about adding layers, but about stripping them away. Each insight, each moment of stillness, each confrontation with your own shadows has been leading you back to the same place, the quiet center where your true self waits, patient and unchanged. Have you ever felt a sudden sense of peace? A moment when all striving falls away and you are simply present, alive and whole? The Taoists would say that is the true master revealing itself. The mind is clear, the heart is quiet, and the light shines without obstruction. There is nothing to prove, nothing to chase, nothing to fear. You may find as you walk this path that the world around you does not always understand. Others may still measure worth by achievement, by status, by outward signs of success. But you know now that the real journey is inward. The true man of no rank walks quietly, without need for recognition, guided by the light that cannot be dimmed by circumstance. Sometimes you wonder if you've been searching for something that was never lost. Sometimes you notice the light at the center and you don't know what it means. You keep looking,